Good morning and welcome back to Advanced Composition with Professor Kent Lee. Hope you're doing okay with your essay assignments. If you need help, please contact me through Zoom, Kakao Chat, maybe email me, but I would, if you really have a problem, please let's arrange maybe a video chat through Kakao or Zoom. That would be the best thing, or maybe you can even phone me in my office phone. I will be available pretty much all this weekend, so don't be afraid to reach out for help, especially if you need a video chat, video conference with me. Pretty much all weekend I'm free for consultation. Nonetheless, today we are starting a new unit. It is my genre analysis unit. And you may be wondering what that is. Well, you'll find out in due time. First, let's talk about the word genre. It's a word from French. In English, it is pronounced genre. Stress on the first part, genre. Second syllable is a weak syllable. It's very light, genre. Now, if you want to pronounce it in the original French and impress your friends, in French, for the R in French and German and Dutch, you use the thing that hangs down at the back of your throat, the uvula, it's called. And so you would say genre in French, genre. Genre. If you want to impress your friends at parties, my favorite genre is British poetry. In English, what's fine to say genre is the j. By the way, your tongue doesn't touch anything for the j. Your tongue doesn't touch the top of the mouth. It's just there. It's like the sh. It's like the sh. Your tongue's kind of bent back for the sh in English. Not like the she in Korean. We're in Korean, your tongue. Korean, Japanese, and Chinese, for like the she sound, your tongue is kind of flat like this, like she. In English, it's bent up, bent back, like she. And then for this sound, you vibrate the vocal cords, genre. So, we are talking about genre in terms of, well, two things. Different styles of writing and language, specifically academic versus non-academic. So you're more used to genre, maybe in a sense that's closer to this. We talk about, prose, novels, poetry, short essays, short stories. Those are different genres of writing. Novel, fantasy novels, historical novels, things like that. So novels and poetry, those are different genres of writing. We're used to talking about genres of music like rock and jazz and classical, and even there are many genres. Or in the classical music context, classical music as a whole, you would talk about actually different, subgenres, but then within the context of just classical, you could call these genres. So there's classical proper, there's Baroque, and there's Impressionism and such. Within rock music, there are many kind of subgenres. There's classic rock and classic pop, and when I was young, new wave and punk music, which kind of merged and got commercialized into what's now called alternative rock. There's urban pop and hip hop and all that stuff. So likewise, we can talk about academic writing versus non-academic writing, academic genre versus non-academic genres like business writing and kind of informal writing, email writing, and things like that. And also in this unit, we're going to talk about different, not only academic genre in general, but sometimes differences in the writing style in different fields, kind of the different subgenres of writing in different academic fields. And we'll get into that in a little while. But first, let's talk about academic versus non-academic writing. How is academic writing different from non-academic writing? How do they differ? How does academic writing differ from non-academic genres such as business writing, case studies, writing a business case study, business reports, technical reports, well, a technical report could be kind of academic actually. So a business report, a company report, a business case study, or informal kinds of writing like emails and blogs and SNS types of writing. What are the key differences? How is academic writing different from non-academic writing? And why are they different? Why does academic writing have these particular features? So what are the distinctive features, basically, of academic writing? And why? Why does it have these specific features and aspects? Why is it different in this way? So I want you to pause the video and discuss for a while. How is academic writing different, and why is it different? And we're back. So usually when asked this question, my students, one of the first things a lot of them will say is the vocabulary. Academic writing is known for the special vocabulary, often longer words, more technical words. And there are good reasons for this. The vocabulary of academic writing in different fields often has a lot more technical words. These are longer multisyllabic words, often from Latin and sometimes from Greek. Most often they're Latin and Greek words. Unlike the more colloquial everyday English word, which may be Latin, but as well as the Old Germanic part of the English language, common everyday words like swim and book and sky and things like that, as opposed to the academic vocabulary like volume and tome and publication and things like that. So each field is known for its nomenclature, the specific vocabulary of a specific field. If you're a linguist, you use specific nomenclature. For example, if you're specializing in phonology, you talk about prosody and intonation and vowel segments and consonant segments and diphthongs and such. If you're in literature, you're going to talk about specialized vocabulary like metonymy and metaphor and synecdoche and things like that, different types of figurative language. Just a few examples. So the jargon, so every field has its jargon. If you're a chess player, you have chess playing terms. If you're a web designer, you have a lot of color terms. If you're a carpenter, you do woodwork and you make furniture, you have all kinds of woodworking and tool terminology. And in academic fields, each field has its own jargon, and in academic fields we often call that nomenclature. So jargon is like the specialized vocabulary of any kind of field or occupation, and often in an academic setting, the academic vocabulary of a very specific academic field is its nomenclature. Nomenclature. Nomen is, by the way, from the Latin word for noun or name. So in the nomenclature. Now, why do academic people like to use specialized vocabulary with lots of long multisyllabic words? Is it because we like to show off? Well, yes, we do like to show off, but there is a more important reason, an even better reason for that. It's for precision. The academic vocabulary is more precise. We need to be very specific and precise and accurate in our expressions and what we say and how we say things. So we need a lot more vocabulary. And as we will see later, we will, of course, sometimes take somewhat general words and give them special meanings in academic contexts, as well as using a lot of very, very specific new terms that are unique to a particular field. So vocabulary is more complex, and that's for the sake of precision. We need to be able to express ourselves and describe things in very precise, specific, and accurate ways. Often people mention the sentence structure. The sentence structure is, of course, different, more complex and complicated types of sentences. Subordinate or dependent clauses. We have infinitive phrases, participle phrases, Often the sentences are longer, joined together, multiple elements, like you can have a main clause and a subordinate clause, or main clause and a participle phrase, participle clause, and often multiple units stacked together in sometimes hugely long sentences. Why? It is again for expressing complex ideas and also for the flow of information. A main clause kind of highlights this is the main idea of the sentence, and then other clauses, other grammatical units in the sentence convey kind of supporting information or secondary information. So there's this sort of flow, main idea, supporting information, main idea, supporting information. So the complex sentence structure makes for better flow and better packaging of a lot of complex information and ideas. So it kind of does some of the work of transitional expressions, like because, since, after. The sentence structure itself also conveys some of that kind of logical flow and flow of information. Some other things you might have talked about, of course, the essay or research paper in a particular field might follow a particular structure, and we'll see examples later on in this unit. So for example, scientific papers follow a very rigid, very specific structure. We have your intro, then you have your maybe background section, and then what's called a literature review, where you critique the recent relevant literature on that research topic. Then you have your experiment, and your experiment section consists of certain other subsections that are kind of expected. Then your results, and then your main discussion, what does this all mean, your conclusion. So there is a certain logical structure. Or for a more general essay, like what you're writing in my class, or for maybe a humanities class, you're going to have at least an introduction with a thesis statement, maybe a background paragraph after that, and then your body paragraphs. Each body paragraph presents one argument, at least, to support your thesis. And these cohere together into a nice essay with a nice logical flow. So there's also a certain logical argumentation, present your main idea in the thesis, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are my main points in the body paragraphs, and each of those has several kind of claims or supporting premises, 1, 2, 3, 4, with clear, specific rationale support, and there's a tight logical organization. The evidence in the body paragraph supports these claims. The claims in the body paragraph support the main idea or topic sentence, the main argument of the body paragraph. Each body paragraph supports the thesis, and one body paragraph flows logically from one to the next. There is a very clear logical flow and development in a way that you don't see in non-academic writing generally. And this is because the particular goals, purposes, and objectives of a writer in any academic field. Finally, essays, research papers are expected to be informative and persuasive. You're communicating, if you're writing such a paper, you're communicating to an intelligent, educated audience who probably knows something about your topic, or is at least somewhat familiar with it, or knows the field anyway. And so you cannot waste your time repeating information that is familiar to the reader, to the audience. You get to the point. In the intro, you get to the point. Maybe this is the background, or this is my thesis, and I'm going to prove it to you like this. So academic writing is informative. You are trying to inform an intelligent reader about something new that he or she really doesn't know, which is maybe your ideas, your findings. And there's persuasive. So you're trying to persuade someone that your idea is valid. Maybe you don't have to convince them that it's right, but you have to convince them that your ideas are valid. If it's a literature paper, you're maybe trying to convince them that at least your interpretation of the poetry of Emily Dickinson is expressing this particular kind of feeling or idea, and that your interpretation is valid, or that this poet has this particular motivation in mind when writing this kind of poem, or this poem was influenced by this event in the writer's life. You're trying to persuade people that at least your interpretation not necessarily is correct, but at least is valid. It has merit, it has some worth, and can shed some light on this piece of literature. If it's more of a social science or science paper, you're trying to prove maybe a certain idea is valid, correct, or at least valid. What about scientific writing, science research writing? Is it persuasive? Sure, it is. So all academic writing is persuasive in some level. For example, if it's a science paper, you're trying to convince people, I've done something cool here with my experiment. My experiment shows something cool. Or I'm trying to convince you I've proven a hypothesis. I came up with a hypothesis and I've proven it, or I've demonstrated it with this experiment. Or I'm trying to convince you that I found evidence from my experiment. I found evidence for a particular theory, for a hypothesis or for a theory. We'll talk about hypotheses and theories later. So all academic writing is informative and in some ways persuasive. This is a cool experiment. I found something valuable, or my findings are valuable. My findings say something interesting. That, in general, is academic writing genre. Those are some general features of academic writing genre. We could also add some other features. The writer. Who is the writer? Well, it's an educated person who is being trained in the field or is a master of the field. If you're a college student, you're being trained in the field, or if you're a professor, or you're supposed to be a master of the field. Who you're writing for? You're writing for, well, if you're a college student writing a paper, you're writing for other college students and your professors. There's an academic audience involved. The writer is an academic person, or at least an academic in training, and the audience, the hypothetical or potential audience, other students, professors, it's an academic audience. It's expected to meet certain criteria of objectivity. The language has to be rational and objective and logical. In order to be informative and persuasive, it has to be objective, not too subjective or personal or emotional. It has to have a certain quality and a certain professional style to it. Speaking of professional, you're in a major and you are probably going into an academic field or a professional field or a business field or some kind of occupation. For now, you're majoring in, if you're in my class, I'm assuming you're majoring in English or another language or international studies. It could be a different major. So let's think about your major. We're going to think about academic writing because you're in an academic writing class and you're doing some kind of an academic major. And I'm going to have you start looking at samples of academic writing in your field probably next week, hopefully, or so. And even if you end up taking a job that's not in this major, that's not in your major, so I know some of you are going to get jobs in a different field. That's not directly related to English. It may not be an academic field. And that's totally fine because the major will benefit you anyway. Companies will want you because of your major, even if it's a different major than what the job seems to be about. So we're here to develop your thinking skills and thinking about, and this will help maybe explain in a job interview why you did that major. Why did you do an English major? You're applying for a company. Why did you major in English? Why should we hire you? You're an English major. Why did you major in English? Well, you can, after this unit, you can maybe tell them more about why and what you got from it, what you learned from it. Especially in terms of, okay, why should we hire you? What kind of abilities do you have from your major that would be relevant to this job in this company? This unit might help you a little bit with that kind of question, at least to think about what your major is about, what it's for, and to communicate verbally in writing your ideas. So we're going to actually think now about your major. And this works really well in a group discussion in a real life class. That's not going to happen, of course, this semester, as you probably heard. So, I have some questions for you now. We're going to start talking about your major for a while. What's your major about? I want you to think about some questions. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and discuss. You can refer to section 9.2 in the book, the PDF copy that I've made available to you. So it's chapter 9, section 2, so 9.2. And there's some more questions there too besides these. I'm going to kind of summarize them here. What's your major about? What do people do in your major? What do they care about? What are the questions and problems that they focus on, especially academic people in your major? Why are you majoring in this? What are your goals and motivation as a student in the major? Which, another way you could say is, why did you major in this topic, in this field? What are some of the particular subfields and specializations in the field? This would be helpful for when you do a job interview someday. So ultimately, what are you doing with your major and why? Why did you choose this major? What's it about? I want you to pause the video for a few minutes and talk about this and to discuss these questions. And we're back. I've got some more questions for you now. As if those earlier questions weren't hard enough. Some more questions for you. What kind of work do people do in the field? What kind of jobs do they get? Especially those that are directly related to the major. What kind of work do people do with it? What can you do with the major? Especially, so whether maybe you're going into a field that's directly related to major or not. What can you do with your major? How is it going to be helpful to you? Why is it valuable for society? Why should people care about what you're studying? Why is it valuable? And many of you are in humanities. So if you're in a humanities kind of field, or if you consider yourself a humanities person, what's the practical value of studying the humanities? Sometimes humanities majors, for example, in Western cultures, sometimes they're sort of the butt, B-U-T-T, butt, or kind of object of jokes. Like a biology major, it is said, often asks questions like, why do we have these life forms? And a physicist will ask, why do things work like this? And an engineer will ask, well, how do things work? How do you make things work like this? And a humanities major will ask, would you like fries with that? It's kind of a cheap joke, implying that you get a college degree in humanities and your best job choice is a job at a fast food restaurant, saying, would you like fries with your order? And it's kind of a cruel joke. There is a stereotype of maybe a humanities person gets a college degree or a master's degree in humanities field, like language, literature, philosophy field, history, and they can't get a good job. That is sometimes true. I mean, I got a degree in German and as a college major, and I only cared about using it as kind of a springboard to doing a master's degree in linguistics. I didn't care anything about anything else, but that was kind of short-sighted of me because the economy kind of was not good at the time, and it was hard for me to get funding for graduate school, and I had to work for a while, and I couldn't really get any good jobs because I didn't really plan things carefully. It doesn't have to be that way. There are actually practical skills, important skills you get from a humanities degree. There are important skills you gain from a humanities degree. It's just that humanities majors often don't know how to articulate or explain that. Whether it's explaining to their friends or family why they are majoring in, why they did a major in, in philosophy or language studies or something, or to a possible employer at a job interview. Why should we hire you? You're a philosophy major. Why should we hire you? Humanities majors often don't understand the importance and value of their fields. I mean, they know it's important to them because they like it. You chose it because you like it. But practically speaking, what's the social value of studying humanities? I think it's important. Even though I'm no longer a humanities person, I moved on to being more of a social science person as a linguist, as an empirical linguist. But my background was in humanities, and that shaped me. That shaped who I am. And I'm glad for it. I'm glad I was a humanities major. I just wish I had kind of planned and prepared it better so that I could get a job, but I didn't. There are often kind of less concrete or tangible benefits of doing a humanities major. What are they? You did a humanities major, but you're applying to a company that doesn't seem to be related to your major. They ask you, why should we hire you? What skills and abilities do you have that would be useful at this company? As a humanities major, you have some. What are they? You just have to think about it. What is it you're getting from your humanities major other than a knowledge of, say, English vocabulary or English linguistics or good German grammar or an understanding of the philosophical problems of ethics or European history? What are the real important social and practical values and benefits of humanities? What are they? Pause the video and discuss this for a while. And we're back. Most of these questions I'm not going to answer. I will maybe say a little bit about linguistics as an example later on, but let me say something about the value of humanities. If you think about the Jurassic Park movies, where scientists clone dinosaur DNA, a famous meme on social media like Facebook is, science can tell you that it's possible to clone a dinosaur. Humanities will tell you why that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to, of course, do something that's really dangerous and morally ethical. Actually, scientifically, it's not possible to clone dinosaurs, at least not with any foreseeable technology. As good as our genetics technology is, we'll probably, hopefully, thankfully, not be able to actually clone dinosaurs, because over millions of years, the DNA, even if it's well preserved somehow, even if we can get dinosaur DNA preserved, like in stomach of a mosquito that once bit a dinosaur and the mosquito is preserved perfectly in amber, the DNA degrades. The DNA degrades over time, no matter how well preserved it is. So we'll probably won't ever be able to clone dinosaurs like in Jurassic Park, thank God. I think scientists, everybody really needs some background or exposure to humanities because it's important for developing your moral or ethical reasoning skills. Moral and ethical reasoning skills, moral thinking skills. It can give you new insights into whatever you're doing. It trains you in thinking, analytical thinking skills. No matter what kind of job you get someday, it will help to develop your ethical reasoning skills, your analytical thinking skills, your creative thinking skills, your creativity. And that's especially important today. Companies now realize more and more that they need people who can think creatively and intelligently. Creative thinking skills, analytical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, social and emotional skills. So, for example, studying literature, for example, is valuable because it helps you to develop your social, emotional, and cultural thinking skills. You could study history and learn about the Industrial Revolution in England, but you don't understand what it was like for the average poor person in England until you read Charles Dickens. You read his different novels about the poor people in England during the Industrial Revolution. You'll learn about people who are different from you and their experiences. You'll learn how to understand people who are different from you, people in different situations, in different times, in different socioeconomic levels. That's something you get from humanities that you don't get from other fields. So it helps develop your social empathy, your social skills, your emotional skills, cross-cultural skills. You're learning not just different languages, but the cultures. And so obviously businesses would find you valuable, not just because you speak the language that you've studied in college, English or German or French, but you've learned about the culture and how to maybe communicate with those people. So businesses will find you valuable for those cultural assets and the intellectual assets, not just what you know, but the thinking ability and your understanding that can help businesses to, reach new markets, to even communicate with people in their own native market, as well as people in foreign markets, and to, meet clients from another country and communicate with them and understand them. Those are valuable skills. So there are all kinds of skills like empathy, critical thinking, ethical reasoning, empathy, emotional intelligence that you can get, cross-cultural skills that you can get that will be valuable for you someday in life. Okay, I have some more questions for you about your major. Think about the different subfields or specializations. Think about what your professors do. Think about them. Your professors have to do research. What kind of research do they do? How do they find new things? How do they make new discoveries? What do they do? Do they do experiments? Do they read a bunch of books? Do they analyze a bunch of literature? I mean, do they need a laboratory or sit in their office? Or what do they do? And then how do they report their findings? How do they publicize their findings? What kind of evidence or support do they have to do? Or if you really have no idea what your professors do, think about you and the classes you're taking in the field. What do you do for your research papers and your courses? How do you communicate your findings, your library work in the paper? What kind of evidence and support do you need for your paper to back up your claims and arguments or ideas in the paper? Pause the video and discuss this for a while. One more question. We've talked about your major. Think about how you would explain it to other people. Explain to your family members why you chose this major, your friends, your significant other. That would be like a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, spouse, whatever. And this is good to think about because you very likely will date and maybe marry somebody from a very different major or background than you. If you're an English major, you're not so likely to marry another English major. You might, but it's not so likely. Especially if you're a female doing a major in English or French or German or Chinese, it's more likely statistically that you're going to end up marrying a guy who is a business major or an engineer or something like that, especially in Korea. How do you explain your major? Go, why did you study that? What's the benefit of that? How do you explain it to your future spouse's family members, your in-laws? When you have children, if you have children someday, how do you explain to your children what you do or why you majored in that in college, especially if you got a job in something else? Why did you get an English major if you ended up working for an advertising company or something like that? How do you explain to your children what you did in college? And how do you explain to your family members why you chose a major? And your family members say, "You're an English major? What kind of job are you going to get with that?" Or, "You're a philosophy major? What kind of job are you going to get with that?" What do you tell them? Pause the video and discuss. Okay, all of this discussion is kind of important because what your major is about and how you do work in your major is going to relate to the kind of academic writing you do in your major, which is something you're going to be looking at later. Before that, we're going to talk about some other points, some other important kind of concepts we need to do first in order to then dive into the genre analysis straight away. So we'll start with that in the next video segment. We're going to talk more about the vocabulary of academic fields and academic English.